ahead and get started. But as we continue, please put your questions in the Q&A box or put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring. The majority of this is going to be a conversation, a chance to ask one of my favorite people on this planet some of the biggest questions I've been thinking about. So, as we get talking, please share your thoughts and we'll kind of answer throughout. So let's get it going. So like I said, if you are new, then maybe my face is unfamiliar to you. My name is Bailey Ritter. I'm originally from Pontiac, Illinois, but live outside of Chicago currently. And my autobiography would be called Consistently Curious, because I feel that anything I've ever done in my life has been because I just want to know more about it, or it like genuinely perplexes me to the fact, or to the sense that I have to like go all into it and be like now a full-blown expert. Like a couple of days ago, I went on this Googling spree of Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac. And like now I like know so much information about Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac. And it's just honestly because I'm like, okay, I have to learn everything about anything, honestly. Yeah, totally. But my esteemed special guest is Anushka Bhaskar. She is from California. She's going to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her background and also all of the insanely cool things she's doing. But she is the founder of Avritah. And I think I first met Anushka nearly a year and a half ago, and we were finally able to meet in person in Vancouver, Canada, of all places. And I just was honestly taken aback by how energetic she was, but authentically energetic she was about everything she was talking about. And so when I found out like 2 weeks ago she was founding this awesome new youth-led nonprofit, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to her. I have to get her on one of these webinars, because it was a really interesting moment for me, because I'm a huge proponent of kind of finding your entryway to any movement, and those entry points are so unique for all of us. It's for the environmental movement, maybe it's climate change that you really found a passion for, advocating for, or maybe it's clean water, or maybe it's plastic pollution. But what I found so interesting about Avritah, and Anushka will kind of talk about it, is it allowed people who genuinely just cared about other people a space in this movement to join us together and kind of fight for this shared future that we all deserve. I'm giving too much away. Obviously, I'm just like so excited to have her here.
No worries at all.
So like I said, a majority of this will be kind of conversational, be asking questions. If you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll ask them. But without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Anushka.
Thank you so much, Bailey. It is such an honor to be here. I am Anushka. Nice to meet everyone. I am 20 years old and I'm actually a current junior at Harvard College, but I'm also an environmental activist. And that's been something that I started at the age of 10. So I'm going on a decade as an environmental activist, which is really funny because at my age, it's hard to be a decade of anything, but I'm the founder and executive director of Avritah, which is an intersectional platform for action really focused on dismantling systems of health and environmental inequity. And I'm also actually a proud member of the Intersectional Environmentalist Council. And that's a group of people like me, like Bailey, who really care about bringing environmental issues to the forefront, but along with other issues of justice that intersect with environmentalism, because environmentalism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply interconnected to so many of the other areas that all of us care about. And for me, that area of intersection, or the primary area of intersection for me, was health equity. And so that's how I started. I'm really honored to come into community with you all to speak about my journey through intersectional environmentalism and also my passions for the intersection of health equity and environmental justice. So that's a little bit about me.
No, that's great. That's like, I always ask people, it's always interesting to hear what other people have to say about themselves.
Yes.
Because I could like go on and on asking about you. But before we get started, I did want to ask just a couple of foundational questions, and that's for those who don't know, can you define environmental justice and health equity as kind of two different but interrelated terms, and then kind of connect them for us?
Definitely. So I'll start with environmental justice. environmental justice is a way of looking at environmentalism that really incorporates the idea of who's being most affected by environmental issues. So for example, an example of an environmental justice issue, which actually also happens to be a health equity issue, is this case study that is happening in real life in Louisiana. So if you've ever heard of a place called Cancer Alley, it's really a stretch of land that runs around like 80 miles or so along the Mississippi River. And it's there where there's so many petrochemical plants and like facilities that release toxic waste into the surrounding environment. A lot of them are involved in the production of plastics. And the thing is that that is obviously an environmental problem with the fact that these factories are ejecting toxins into the environment, but it's also a justice issue because the people that live in these communities are predominantly Black and brown people. And these are people who have traditionally been disenfranchised, have been suppressed when it comes to voting, have been dealing with the brunt of the health effects of dealing with the highest consequences of this pollution. And then they also struggle with health equity. So health equity is basically the idea that people dependent on different social determinants, like depending on where they live, depending on who they are, have differential access to health and healthcare. And this issue with Cancer Alley, so the reason they call it Cancer Alley is because so many of these people in this community are not only dealing with the health effects of this issue, but they're getting cancer. And then they also have really limited access to healthcare, which means that not only are they getting cancer from this environmental issue, but they're also not being able to get treatment and adequate treatment for that cancer. So it's that hopefully kind of helps define the two ideas, the concepts in a really like tangible way, and hopefully demonstrates a little bit about why they intersect, because we can't consider really the health of the planet without first considering the health of the people that depend on that planet and the ecosystems of that planet.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. And something to me that's, since learning kind of about the mission of Avritah, but kind of looking more deeply into kind of the interconnectedness of this issue, what I found was a lot of people weren't talking about it as interconnected.
Right.
But they were talking about it in two different spaces when
Yeah.
the same narrative was happening in both. And
Yeah.
so you found a lot of like advocates or activists kind of like going this way and then another trying to go this way. And it's like, no, we gotta get together. So I guess, what does that mean in terms of like true action? If we're looking to dismantle these systems of inequity together, what does that look like in true action?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think that in one sense, like the first way that I came to this issue was really, like you said, observing that there was like environmentalists and there was people that cared about health, and they were two completely separate things. So for me, studying, actually, I'm pre-med, but I'm also studying in school government and biology. And so that means I've been exposed to all sorts of different people with all sorts of different interests. And it's funny because a lot of them, the ones that consider themselves pre-health professionals or people that want to study health and health equity as a profession, are not considering climate change and other related environmental issues as connected with that. And so for me, the first thing that I did actually personally in kind of tackling like what in answering this question that you asked me, like what does action really look like? My first action was really to bring everybody together to have a conversation about it. And so that's actually the precursor to Avritah started, the Harvard Environmental Action and Leadership Summit. And it was something that happened last October of 2019. And 100 Harvard students, administrators, local politicians, CEOs of environmentally friendly companies, which there are some, but they're few, and as well as like some professors from Harvard came together to really have a discussion about the interconnection of human health and the environment. And that conversation was really aimed at helping each and every person on both sides of the aisle understand how to take action at the intersection of both of them. And it was really, really interesting to me there because so many people, like I said, had never considered the other one as interconnecting. So I think the first step is really to bring awareness to this idea of it being interconnected. And as intersectional environmentalism, which we'll probably talk about more in a bit, gets to be more recognized, I think more people will start to see that any issue that they care about can really be incorporated with the other issues that they care about, and they don't have to be separated. So I did find a couple people, Bailey, like in that group of healthcare people and in that group of environmental people that did want to care about the other, but felt like they had to choose one path. And so that was a big turning point for me, helping myself and also others realize, including me, all others realize that we have to allow ourselves to look at intersections, because that we might make very specific and change in that way.
Yeah, no, that just actually made me skip down to one of my other questions is,
Yeah.
I think the last time we chatted, you actually said something like, in 2020, there's no such thing as like a one lane activist. Like there's no
Yes.
like there's no way you can just be one issue focused anymore, because
Right.
all the intersectionality, if it wasn't obvious before, is becoming so obviously
Yeah.
obvious.
Yes.
How do you, because I find I like, just after having conversations like these, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have to learn everything about like the true kind of like health inequity happening, not only in my backyard, but like around the world.
Definitely.
But I also have 5 other things that I'm like, I also need to learn about X, Y, and Z.
Right.
How do you manage trying to balance learning so much about each of these issues separately so that you can have the expertise to bring them together?
That is a really good question. So I'll start with the going to the heart of this question. I think the way that like we kind of all of these different like Venn diagrams where we look for like what's the middle portion. I think there's one huge Venn diagram, and it's like there's one big middle portion. And what I mean by that is in a lot of these a lot of the inequities and the difficulties that we're seeing, whether it's in environmentalism and healthcare and other places, it comes down to like what this big fancy scary word, systems of oppression. So things like racism, things like sexism, things like just systematic oppression have contributed to a lot of these issues. Or overconsumption is a really good example. So like we see like overconsumption is the root of a lot of different problems, whether it's an environmental problem or a health problem. One example of that is, back to Cancer Alley for a second. If you think about it, the reason that we have these tons and tons of these petrochemical plants dumping toxins into the environment is because we're consuming plastics at such a high rate that we're allowing ourselves to pollute the environment and the people living near these factories without really thinking too much about it. And that's an example of a core problem which intersects both that health issue that's being created and also that environmental issue that's being created. Then there's the issue of racism. There's those people, the predominantly Black and brown people who are being affected because of centuries and centuries of racism, have been disenfranchised in certain ways in our society. And so they don't have, even if they have the voice and they're speaking up, sometimes they don't have people listening to them because of these really, really big systemic problems. And so that's not to say like that there's no way to solve them. It just means that at the root, so many of these issues are actually interconnected by these systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like more looking at the systems and then kind of going in kind of like as you go, across the different levels, if you will, kind of like that first level of understanding, and then like getting deeper and getting deeper.
Yeah.
And
as you get deeper in each of these areas, exactly. Like if you're passionate about like gender justice, but you're also passionate about the environment, you'll find that like the root, like sexism that you're trying to solve in the gender justice area is also contributing to a lot of issues in environmentalism. There was recently an article published about how like a lot of times toxic masculinity is actually contributing to men not being as, or male identifying people not being as open to taking environmental action because they feel like it portrays them as weak. And so that's something we need to address on a different level, maybe than just an environmental level. It's something that we might want to come at from a gender justice perspective, but it's really an environmental problem. It has environmental consequences. So that's what I mean. I think you can come to like all of these multiplicities of issue areas that you want to focus on, but at their core, a lot of them have the same root problems. And that's how we can kind of resolve our desire to do multiple things at the same time, or address multiple issues.
And honestly, I find that the more you kind of take it from that approach, the more invested you become, because you're like, wow, like you're just shocked by everything you're learning. You're relearning, unlearning, and you find yourself kind of snowballing into like getting to the heart of both why you do what you do, but also the heart of why we all must kind of work together and, you know, work together to ensure the future that we all deserve and that we want.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
How much do you read? Like, are you constantly reading?
Well, I mean, the thing is I think like having friends like you has been a really big help in kind of helping me learn what I need to learn without spending all of my day with my head trudged in a book. Although, I mean, I have plenty of book recommendations. I think that so much of like me coming to this intersection myself, for example, was inspired by seeing other people around me kind of shift and like seeing their activism shift and seeing that it wasn't like this one lane, like, oh, I'm somebody who cares about plastics. It was like, okay, I'm somebody who cares about the plastic pollution problem and I care about our oceans, but I also care about the people who depend on our oceans and I care about the health of those people that depend on our oceans. So that was the first time for me where I was seeing like an intersection between health equity and environmental justice. And so learning about it then meant that I was relying on my friends as resources, like you and others, but also really more than just reading like books or like print news. It was actually reading like the perspectives of the people who are most affected by these problems. So a great way to do that is by, as you know, looking on social media, because a lot of people who typically don't have a platform in traditional news sources are being able to have a platform via social media. And so finding people who are on the front lines of the environmental crises that we're facing and the health crises that we're facing as a result of environmental problems is really the way that I've been learning about the interconnections, because it's just like a real life example of these theories and concepts that we're so lucky and have the privilege to study like separately from us. And then there's people who are really experiencing that on a daily basis, and they can really tell you what it's like at their individual level, which also kind of gives perspective to these broader ideas that we're able to incorporate or that I've been teaching myself or learning.
Yeah, no, honestly, we'll talk about it in a second, but if all of you want to follow an amazing account at Intersectional Environmentalist, is I learn so much from all of the folks at that organization and working so hard to kind of put that content together. So we'll actually talk about that. This is like a two-part question.
Okay.
And for everyone watching, please, like, wealth of knowledge you're looking at. So definitely don't be shy, afraid to ask Anushka questions. But two-part question: what does intersectional environmentalism, mean definition-wise, and what does it mean to you? And I also kind of want to shout out and give credit to Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the person who first coined that term, lawyer and professor, amazing person to follow as well, a huge wealth of knowledge there. But yeah, the definition of that and what does that actually mean to you, and like Anushka waking up as an intersectional environmentalism.
Definitely.
Environmentalist.
No worries, lots of words. Absolutely, no worries. So I think, like you said, exactly, intersectional environmentalism started with the term intersectionality, coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and that term intersectionality was really first applied to feminism. And so intersectional feminism was really a way of looking at feminist issues from multiple lenses. Really, like, intersectionality at its core is a theory that incorporates that there are multiple layers of someone's identity that will be incorporated into any sort of justice issue. So in intersectional feminism, for example, recognize that maybe white women in society weren't facing the same issues as maybe a Black woman in society was. And so while they were both fighting for gender justice, there was different nuances in one person's fight as opposed to the other. And so there were in intersectional feminism recognized that there were ways that these women of different backgrounds but had the same goal could support one another, so that there was equity as opposed to just equality. And so that's where that term started. And then intersectional environmentalism started when actually a really good friend of mine, Leah Thomas, came up with this idea to combine this word intersectional that she learned from feminism and take it to environmentalism. And so intersectional environmentalism is really an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both protection of people as well as the planet. So normally we're used to environmentalism being about protecting the planet, but this time environmentalism is asking who is being most affected by these planetary issues, and also what do we as environmentalists have to bring to the table when it comes to our stories of environmentalism. Like, Bailey, neither you or I should ever have to feel like we have to leave any part of our identity when it comes to fighting for what we care about. Rather, it's probably stronger if we incorporate our personal identities into the work that we're doing. So intersectional environmentalism is also special because it identifies the ways in which injustices that are happening to marginalized communities and the earth are interconnected. So in one example, I have a really good friend on the Intersectional Environmentalist Council whose name is Jordan, and she has an organization called Rising Hearts, and that organization works to raise awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a really difficult but important topic. And really what the reason that like, you might ask, like, okay, that's really important, but like, how does that have anything to do with environmentalism? And so the reason for that is because a lot of the violence, unfortunately, that's being perpetrated towards Indigenous women is also rooted in the same kind of mind frame that violence that is being perpetrated towards the earth. And so that's like something that I learned recently. I never thought that things that seem so separate could be so interconnected, but that's an example of where the injustice being perpetuated towards a marginalized community is also the kind of in the same vein as the injustice being perpetuated towards the earth. And ultimately, intersectional environmentalism brings these social injustices to the front. I'm just getting comfortable, Bailey, talking about these really heavy concepts like missing and murdered Indigenous women, and really learning the lingo to speak up and advocate for those people who belong to those communities that are doing the work already within their communities, and to bring awareness. I think that intersectional environmentalism has allowed me to kind of actually challenge myself, because sometimes it can be like, oh, that's not my place to speak, or like, this isn't my area of expertise, right? So I feel like, especially as you would know, as somebody who's so curious, like, it's so hard sometimes it's hard to like be quiet about something, but it's also hard to know where to start when you're tackling such like systemic issues, especially ones like racism and sexism and other injustices. So that's the thing that I like most about intersectional environmentalism, is it focuses on the humanity of you as the environmentalist. It focuses on the humanity of those who are being affected by environmental problems. And then in doing so allows all of these different issues to be brought together and be tackled at the same time, rather than trying to silo them or create sort of separate identities when you're talking about these issues.
Yeah. How has it changed your work? I mean, you've been active since you were 10?
Yes.
Like, so long. You're like, oh, I'm so young. You're like been in this game for like 10 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Work. How has that changed what you do?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, actually. So I started out in the environmental space, like I said, when I was 10 years old. And the way that I started out in the environmental space was really by speaking at city council. And it was about actually a plastic bag ban in the city of Huntington Beach, which is where I went to school. When I was how old? 10. So 10, I was in fifth grade. And so it was then that when I spoke at city council, first of all, as a 10-year-old, I didn't even know that young people or people at all could go speak at city council, because I was just getting the bearing of how government works. And also I was really surprised to see that like my voice had power, and I had power as a young person in speaking up about something that I cared about. And so with that, I started with the issue of plastic pollution. And when I learned about plastic pollution, I really didn't come to it as an ocean lover. I didn't come to it as a nature lover, because I wasn't somebody that grew up like an outdoorsy person. But this is just proof that anybody can be an environmentalist, because for me, learning about plastic pollution, the thing that drew me in the most was the effect that plastics were having on human health. And I definitely cared about ecosystem health, and I was appalled but not surprised, even at the age of 10, that this was happening to our ecosystem. But I couldn't understand how we as humans couldn't have enough empathy for other humans, or even ourselves, so as not to use plastic products, or so as not to have such a intensity of pollution in the ecosystems that we depended on. So that was like the spark of this, like, oh, I really care about health, but I really care about this plastics problem. And over the years, I kind of like spent a lot of time in the plastics specific space, like tackling plastic ocean pollution. And I was really struggling to kind of reconcile like this itch that I had, that it was really the human health effects of plastic that I cared about, because there was no specific like area just for that. And so for me, I realized as I came to learn more about climate change, I came to learn more about air pollution, water pollution. It was health that really brought me to all of these different environmental problems, rather than the other way around, because for me, that was like the first connection that I had because of experiences I had as a young person with my grandparents and their illnesses. So that's where the passion for health came from. And so to sum it up, really, after a long time kind of thinking about it as like, I can be a pre-med and I care about health and healthcare and fixing the healthcare system in the US, and I can care about the environment, but they have to be separate and they have to be different. I finally realized that I really wanted to create a space and also just research and learn about them intersectionally, because in my professional career, whatever I end up doing, whether it's being a doctor or a healthcare professional in some other way, I want to bring the conversation about climate change, about environmental issues to the forefront. For example, in Health Affairs, which is a very well-known health policy journal, like I was just reading through it the other day to see what they have about climate change. And while they talk about social determinants of health, I personally think that anybody who cares about health policy in the next 20, 30, 30, the next 5-10 years, like 2 years maybe, like should be talking about climate change, because that's going to be affecting the way that people seek out healthcare, the way that people need, like what kind of care people are needing and at what scale. So this is the kind of thing where I think if we have more spaces like Avritah, we have more conversations like this one, more people will start to see, and higher and higher up, people will start to recognize that we have to start expanding the academic areas that we focus on, especially when it comes to professionalizing ourselves. So hopefully that answers is like, basically I just couldn't take it anymore and decided that I wanted to bring myself into the work I was doing as an environmentalist, because otherwise it was like school is this and work and fun, passion work is this. So.
No, that's a great answer. Literally, I feel like I talk to people all of the time, and I'm like, I've truly never met a person in my life who's been like, you know what? I just want to destroy our planet. Like, I just hate it here. I just want it to like explode. I hate it. Yeah. What's always missing is that they're going, here are all of the things I can provide skill set wise. Here are all of the things I'm passionate about. There just doesn't seem to be kind of like a guide going, here's how you can connect it if you do care about people and planet. Like, I people ask like, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give? And it's like, continue to do what you're passionate about. If you want to be a dentist, if you want to be a Zumba instructor, if you want to be anything, there is a way, I promise you, to connect that to people and planet and like help ensure the future. I keep saying it, the future we all deserve and collectively. And so I think that's a great answer, that you're like, wait a second, I have this and this. What if we let's try the thing where we put them together? Like,
exactly. And it makes you more unique as well. I mean, like, just in terms of if you're applying to professional schools or you care about, I mean, I don't think you should think about yourself through an application, but it does matter kind of in your professional career when you're trying to differentiate yourself and see what makes you unique. You're unique when you go after what you care about. It just so happens that most of the time you're one of the first people to think about something in that way. And even if you're not, you're then able to find a tribe that will help you innovate and create in new ways that you didn't think were possible before, kind of taking the leap to be like, no, I'm going to put this together, even if nobody else is right now.
Yeah. We actually have our first question. This is from Sophia. Thanks so much, Sophia. How do you combat feeling defeated/burned out? And how do you stay hopeful and recharge?
That is such a good question. So relevant. It's the beginning of the school year for me, it's new beginnings are always fun, but sometimes I find myself burnt out whenever there's like a new transition. And so I actually was dealing with this for the past like 2 weeks ago. I was going through it really again, with a little bit of burnout and just feeling a little bit defeated and a little bit overwhelmed because there's just so much happening. I mean, between like what we learned about ICE, what we have with RBG passing away, like there's just so many things happening, and it feels like every day there's something else to care about and worry about and concern over. But I think the way to do it is really to go back. For me, actually, really cliche, actually, first thing I do is actually just focus on the breath. The other title of my memoir, like my life story, would have definitely been like, come back to the breath, because I think that just like taking most of the time, like when I'm like find myself burnt out and defeated, I just have been for days on end breathing up here and not breathing on my stomach. And like when I finally take a real deep breath, it's amazing how I realize like my energy has just been up here and up here for so many days and so many weeks because of different triggers or different environmental factors. And so kind of just spending some time with my breath, and then from there kind of writing down or journaling or really reflecting on what are some good things that happened today or in the last couple of weeks or whenever. Because that, whether it's like, oh, I saw the sunset, like, oh, I turned an assignment on time and there was confetti, like that, those little things are the reason that, number one, we tackle these big systemic issues. And they're also the reason that like I think a lot of people have this thing where they're like, okay, sometimes the reward of the work is just the work itself. But at some point, like the human brain is better keyed up if you have a smaller, more tangible and more more visible short-term reward as well. So rewarding yourself, whether that's again like taking doing something small for yourself, or reading a really nice book like purely for leisure, maybe completely unrelated to your passion areas, because sometimes passion is work even if it doesn't feel like it because it's so emboldening. I think is a really important way that I've been approaching it recently. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that was great. I think it's so hard. My friend Laura Johnson always says it's a marathon, not a race. And
Yeah.
I think it's really hard for, especially people who are really kind of consumed by learning about all of these issues day in and day out, and
Yeah.
getting solutions, and then kind of getting pushback against solutions, and then finding an entry point, and then like getting shut out of that entry point. It's like a dance. Like sometimes it's going really great, and then sometimes somebody steps on your foot and you're like,
Yeah.
I have to go back to square one again.
Yeah, literally.
Start over. I don't know why I just made up that analogy. There's probably
I love it. I love it.
analogies than like ballroom dancing. But
Oh, I love it. Go ahead.
no, I think burnout is one of those things that we're all kind of collectively trying to figure out. Like all trying to go, wait a second, my brain is telling me like go, 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 learn, consume, do all this stuff. And your body, your heart, your energy is like, come on, like
yeah. Hold up.
But I think you know, you mentioned at the beginning, this is, I mean, the people watching, but you know, people watching this later on YouTube as well, this is community. And
Definitely.
I think sometimes we forget that there are like hundreds and thousands of other people holding it up for us, and we can put our hands down for however long you need to put them back up, to take that pressure off of somebody else.
That is exactly right. That's actually was the source of my burnout, was just feeling like, oh my gosh, like if I'm not like on Instagram and I'm not active, like what am I going to be doing? Like I'm just letting everything fall. Like actually, this reminds me, you just reminded me, Bailey, of a really good quote that I've been kind of using as a mantra, which is funny. Sometimes you forget your mantra. Like I feel like you sometimes find a good mantra, you have to remind yourself of it because you might forget it. So this is a good mantra that I've been trying to use lately. It's like, okay, it's okay to drop the ball as long as you know which balls are glass and which balls are rubber. Wow. So like this is one of those examples where it's like your work, just remember that it's not necessarily a glass ball. Most likely it's actually a rubber ball, and it's good for you to bounce it once in a while. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's healthy. So I think that's like one cool way I like that helps me to remember that fact.
Yeah. That's really good. No, thanks for that question, Sophia. I'm always trying to like bring in conversations like these, the mental health aspect of any kind of advocating for anything, because it takes it out of you when you're constantly giving, you know, of your knowledge, of your spirit, of your energy, you know, you get depleted. And so I think
that's so true.
Great. Another question, I just was actually asked this most recently, whether in my personal advocacy work, whether I put the emphasis when I'm talking to people and they're like, Bailey, what can I do? Like, what's the one thing I can do? Whether I put the emphasis on personal action or on holding those in leadership accountable. And I think a lot of people advocate one way and other people kind of advocate the other. But the one thing that I noticed about Avritah is that, you know, in your guys' activations, which check out their website, I'll have the little link at the end, but you guys kind of focus on both and kind of connect those together. I'm assuming your answer, but like, where do you put the emphasis in your advocacy work, and how do you make that possible?
Definitely. That's such a good question, Bailey. Holy crap. Okay. So first things first.
I'm like, really, I like spent so long. I'm like, I get her for 45 minutes.
Of course.
Everything I want to ask.
No, brilliant. This is a really good question. It's something that I thought about for a really long time because I actually used to oscillate between the two. So I started out with like totally the personal action. Like when I was 10, I was like, okay, everybody just needs to like quit straws, quit like the individual plastics, quit this and that. Like, I don't understand like how individual consumers are so selfish, including me. So over time, I started to realize this problem was not as simple as quitting or removing some certain habits, whether it's plastic in that context, or in terms of climate change, quitting fossil fuels, reducing your personal carbon footprint, reducing your travel and different things like that, those different personal actions we all know about. So over time, as I learned that it was more and more systemic, I completely quit the personal action thing. I was like, no, okay, we need to just focus on the systemic problems. Like, we need to really call the players that are most responsible for perpetuating these systemic issues into question. We need to hold them accountable. And I'm like, take down the establishment, like, let's go. But then that was also a little bit too much, because it was kind of excluding some part of me that on a daily basis felt like there was something I wanted to contribute to, changing habits and changing systems. And so for me, the way that I reconciled it was actually remembering a teaching that I heard in my family's Hindu and Buddhist. And so we were listening to a Buddhist teacher talk about non-duality. And it actually inspired me to apply that concept to what I was going through with the personal action, systemic action question. And really, this concept of non-duality is one that considers that you don't have to choose one or the other. Those can exist at the same time. I think when it comes to the idea of truth, people love black and white, but I think more and more it's become important in my life to really appreciate the gray and really be comfortable and happy with that gray. And so for me, the gray is that I think you can tackle systemic issues by taking personal action and also calling into question calling into question and also identifying the leverage points nearby you for systemic change. So at Avritah, what the goal was to have that non-duality exist there as well. And so for us, the activations, which are basically my way of explaining and our way of explaining that we want to help you take action while we take action ourselves. Those activations are really about helping each and every person find their path to environmental action, and they're non-comprehensive. I like a total disclaimer right there. Like, I think we have research, education, advocacy, and personal action, and I see each of those as you can take on research at a systemic level, but you also can take on research in a personal way. Like, we can read books by ourselves, and we can teach our friends about what we're learning and answer the questions that we're interested in, or we can look at research in a systemic way and call upon institutions to do research that really goes to the core of these questions and ask those with privilege and access to really research the core. Education is the same way. Maybe you want to educate your friends about how to quit their addiction to like single-use plastic products, but maybe you want to educate an entire community about like for me, it's my most current project is working to educate pre-meds and other people who care about health about environmentalism, and that's like a much bigger, more systemic approach to the issue that I care about. So I think in each and every path that of these activations that I just gave to has a systemic component and has a more individual component, and I think you need to have both. That's my long-winded, hopefully comprehensive answer.
No, super comprehensive. I completely agree. I kind of did that similarly. I was like, no. Like, why are these the top 1% putting so much pressure on us when we are largely not the ones contributing the most? And it was like, no, but that kind of takes my power away. Like, I want to feel like I have it in my hands, you have it in yours, to actually wake up every single day and, as my dad loves to say, do what you can with what you have, with the time you have. Like, I kind of grew up and lived by that. And when I was putting so much pressure on kind of like people in leadership, I was like, but what do I do? Like,
where's my piece? Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think it also, depends on what gives people power, where they feel like, no, maybe I can't today, but I can hold someone up there accountable by writing, calling, emailing, advocating, signing something, attending a meeting. Like, it really is helpful some days like that. And sometimes I'm like, I can't do that, but today I'm going to X, Y, and Z. And that gives me like, all right, I'm contributing. I'm hopefully, I always say, like, one of the biggest things you can do that might seem very small is just have conversations and talk to people about these issues. I promise you, they make more of a difference than you could ever possibly imagine. And sometimes they mean more than like calling up one of your senators and advocating for something. Although for all of those watching in the US, please call your senators and ask them to delay the vote for RBG seats. So that's a right now thing. Akila Ban Laura asks, any book recommendations?
Ooh, this is such a good question. So actually, I will say that I have one specific one, but then I have a place where you can go for more recommendations.
Yes.
So the first specific one is I'm gonna I'm gonna do a live Google to make sure I'm gonna get the name of the book right, because it's actually a pretty long name. Um, I think it's called Environmental Racism. It's Assault on the American Mind.
Wow.
I'm not exactly sure. I have read it though, believe it or not, even though I don't know the name. Um,
That's a great question. We're always asking book
Yep.
recommendations.
Got it. Perfect. A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. It's by Harriet A. Washington. And it's really a powerful look at the consequences of environmental racism. And it does have sort of a health lens, which is really the part where my interest in it stemmed from. And I think Miss Washington is herself an amazing woman who's also a Black woman, and she is I think she's working to educate other people like myself, hopefully working in kind of people that care about health to also care about environmental racism and really see its effects. And then another book, I lied, two books. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who was the doctor who whistle blew the Flint crisis. Again, book titles are not my thing. I know the books that I've read, I just don't know their names. This book is about, I think it's, no, I thought I had the name, I don't. But basically it's her book about like what she saw in Flint and really what her experience was like, kind of whistleblowing the crisis and really getting politicians and people in power to take action, and really her using her individual power to encourage that systemic change and calling attention to it nationally. So
Yeah,
that's a really good book as well.
that's awesome. Yeah, no, we love book recommendations. I'm always looking for something to read, especially still in quarantine. Sadly, we're coming like this went so fast. I do have like one kind of remaining question. If anyone watching has questions, please right now do it, type it, everything, put it in the chat. But what are things that viewers, I know kind of for some of you, maybe this is the first time that you're hearing a lot about these topics and you're like, I care, but these are huge. Like these feel really heavy. And even I think using words like dismantling systems seem like really overwhelming and like very
Yes.
heavy. But what are things that viewers watching can do, little things, big things, to kind of help fight for systems of health equity and environmental justice, you know, either separately or together?
Definitely. So in a shameless plug moment,
Yeah, no, definitely mention Avritah.
I think that has the comprehensive answer, and I'll give the short form answer. But Avritah, www.avritah.org, it has kind of, I think each and every person has a different way of approaching systemic issues like these ones, and hopefully Avritah and the Intersectional Environmentalist website have kind of the answers to getting comfortable with these huge kind of terms and these like talking about systems of oppression and recognizing our own privilege and complicity in these problems, but also when it comes to taking action. So Avritah has the activations that I mentioned. And I really think that every single person should take the time to reflect before jumping into action, because that's something that I recently have been really working on, is like before embarking on any new projects or taking on any new commitments or developing any sort of programming within Avritah, I really want to see that what is the need before I just go out there and give. I really want to focus on identifying what the communities that I care about most need from me, and also how can I make sure to amplify their voices rather than talking for them or telling them what I'm going to do for them. So that's been really important to me lately, is connecting. If I can say one thing, is one way to address issues of environmental justice and health and equity is to use social media as a resource to find out who are those people who are being most affected and who are those people that are community voices that I should be listening to and supporting. And one really good personal action step that I think I want to bring up, because it's new to me, but it's really important, is donating to mutual aid funds. And that's a concept that is kind of new because people used to, it wasn't as common as it has become recently. And that what a mutual aid fund really is. It's kind of like outside of a nonprofit or a designated organization. It's a way to give directly to a community that is working to support themselves. So, for example, following the California and Oregon wildfires, I've Avritah has been working with Beatriz Basurto of the 805 Undocu Fund to raise funds through mutual aid to give back directly to the farm workers and specifically Indigenous farm workers who have been working throughout this environmental crisis at risk to their health and their well-being. And that mutual aid fund is specifically dedicated to contributing school supplies and food to those families. So that's an example of like, that's a way of tackling environmental injustice that wouldn't even seem like it's tackling environmental injustice, but it totally is, because it's really addressing the root of these issues and supporting people who are being affected by these problems. So that's one example. Please check out the Avritah website because I would like to have a more comprehensive answer, and I want everyone to get involved. And also you can reach out to me at any time. I think I dropped my email in the chat, and I would love to hear from you all.
If you have time, we have one more question in
the
chat.
I'm free. Yeah.
This is from Anna Maria. How do you deal when people in power implement policies that go against your values and make your work feel useless?
Wow, that is a really good question.
Yeah, wow. People came with the questions today.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, you know, when it comes to people, one way I deal with it, first thing I think is someday we will be the people in power, and they are not going to have the last word on whatever the issue is. So while it might feel really, really hopeless in the moment, I know for a fact that for me, it's take a second to mourn and then take a second to reactivate and really use that as more fuel and more motivation so that we, people that look like us, like Bailey and I and others, can really see ourselves in positions of power, and we'll be implementing the policies that we want to see, and including you, Anna Maria. So I think that your work also is never useless because, or I like to think that my work is never useless because even if it doesn't go the way I planned, it seems funny to say, but it's definitely the thought that counts. And it's also, as long as you know that you did it, that's all you need. Like it's one of that, it's like that tree that falls in the forest kind of question. Like if nobody heard the tree fall, did it really fall? Or nobody saw it, did it really fall? And my answer is yes, definitely, because that tree knows it fell. Like, I don't know, like that's my way of approaching it. And I think that, that it's definitely really difficult and it's really unfair, and it can be really disempowering when you see people in power implement policies that go against your values. But I think if we can make one good thing out of it, it's that it's more fuel to the fire in a good way.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, I actually have Anushka's contact right here. So let me make that full screen. Thank you, Anushka. Thank you, everyone, for being here, joining in on this conversation, bringing great questions. You see these two little QR? What you do is take your phone, literally like you're taking a picture, and just scan over that and act like you're taking a picture. To learn more about Avritah right now, literally Google it. It's like, it's one of the most, I told Anushka this when I first chatted with her. It's one of the most comprehensive websites that I've ever been to. Quick plug, she wrote most of the copy for the website. So like, literally so many hours, blood, sweat, and tears, I think is what, yeah, blood, sweat, and tears went into this website. So please check it out. And they have a little section talking about how you can actually get involved, how you can join their work. And, you know, if something really resonated with you in this, put it to good use. Join their mission, join missions of so many countless fearless people doing this work to bring kind of these issues to the forefront of conversation. I also did want to do a quick plug as well. Also, I love like we're at sunset. I wish we could both be in this background pictures together doing this webinar. But quick plug as well, if you see on the left-hand side, apply for the World Oceans Day Youth Advisory Council. Those applications are open until October 2nd. You'll be joining alumni like me and Anushka actually, which is really great and cool. But you'll be joining a group of really awesome young people around the globe who are working to make a shared difference for our ocean's health, because we live on a blue planet. And so, you know, if you're passionate about these topics, bring them to the council, apply today. But before we go, we want to keep the conversation going. So use the hashtag RiseUpWebinar to tell us the one thing of hopefully so many that you're doing after this webinar to continue to fight for systems of health equity and environmental justice. People, I can't encourage you enough to continue learning. You know, this is just like a little taste, right? Like this is like really a little bit of the foundations of these conversations, but there's so much happening online, on social media. Give Intersectional Environmentalist a follow, give Avritah a follow, of course, and Anushka herself, because they're all sharing some really great content. I found myself every day going, what? Like, oh my God, I need to tell everyone and their neighbor about this. Today I learned a new term, ocean justice. And now I'm like super obsessed with learning about ocean justice. Anyways, Anushka, thank you so much for being here, taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to chat with us all, be in community with us, as you said. You're awesome. Continue to be fearless, continue to just fighting the good fight, because I know I'm optimistic because I know that there are people like you on our planet fighting tirelessly, but also people like all of you watching, fighting so hard to make sure we have a beautiful, healthy planet for beautiful, healthy people. So that's all I have today, folks. I hopefully will see you next month. You're awesome, Anushka. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you really soon.